Obviously, we as fans know Stu and Helen Hart as the patriarch and matriarch of the Hart family, um, but they're your mum and dad. What were they like as parents away from the world of wrestling? Did they ever get away from the world of wrestling? I guess it's the first question.
Yeah. It was interesting because they lived in the house where they had the office and they raised all the kids, and so it was it was a household, and a business being run at the same time, and all these interactions with 12 kids, and sometimes a lot of friends and cousins that would come over. So there's all sorts of things going on in different rooms of the house, not just the dungeon, in the basement, but um, you know, different people watching television. Upstairs, somebody might be playing pool or ping pong. Outside, we played football and baseball. There was a lot of sports outside. But my parents, I thought they did a great job of raising 12 kids, which was pretty difficult, and focusing on the business, which really required constant attention. There were phone calls coming in. It wasn't like business started at 9 and finished at 5 o'clock. There was stuff that was going on all day. If the wrestlers were late getting to a show, or there was a mishap at a show, and all the shows were in the evenings, they would have to answer the phones at night. And so, there was this constant focus on wrestling, and all the shows that went on. But, I think they just did a great job of raising us as kids, getting us to and from school, allowing us to partake in different extracurricular activities. And my parents never pushed wrestling on any of us. If we followed that, that's great. But there was always the expectation that we needed to get an education and something to fall back on, because there was no guarantees with wrestling. I think they knew that even in the 70s and 80s, and your career could end very short, or prematurely, if you got injured, or you just didn't get over as a performer. So they always impressed on us to have something else to fall back on. So I went into teaching. A couple of my older brothers, Bruce and Keith, went into teaching. Keith was a fireman as well, and so that way we weren't solely relying on wrestling, as a profession. We had something else to fall back on. But it was always exciting growing up there, with wrestlers coming and going, sometimes to do business. There'd be guys who would work out in the dungeon. Sometimes wrestlers would just come out to use the weights and work out there. And then, sometimes they would work on some holds or moves, so the gym was always accessible. The dungeon was always accessible for wrestlers. And then when the weather was nice, we had a ring set up outside. So that was great, especially for Owen, because when he first started out, he practiced his moves, in the dungeon and then outside. Like when he did the moonsault from the top rope, he first did that at the house, and he practiced that in that way. Wasn't in front of an audience. It wasn't in front of his peers. He just had a couple of spotters. Even Chris Benoit had some of his very early training, at the house, and it was great. There's just always that opportunity to work on some moves, practice your craft. Visit the family, have a meal there. My dad was always very busy in the kitchen. He was making breakfast and lunches and dinners. My mom would be working in the office and answering all the calls. So they had an incredible relationship and partnership, to run the business and raise 12 kids. And I think they did a pretty outstanding job.
It's incredible. When you talk about it, it makes you realize that, they were about 5 decades ahead of their time, really. They're both self-employed, working from home, 50-50 parenting. These are all the things that we work so hard to achieve now, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And my dad was a firm disciplinarian, and sometimes he was a physical disciplinarian. And sometimes that was needed, in the earlier generations, now, parents can't use any physical force. Teachers can't use physical force, on students. Sometimes even if you're restraining them or stopping them from harming someone else or themselves. But we lived in a different period then. And, my dad um, he was a firm parent, and yeah, sometimes he would physically punish at least the boys, the sons, but quite often we had it coming, and it would rein us in, and a lot of parents had to do that to kind of keep control of their kids and not lose them to drugs or just dropping out of school or joining gangs, or having unsafe or unproductive lifestyles.